Matt Taraldsen. I am the supervisory meteorologist at the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. And my team is the team that forecasts air quality and issues air quality alerts. This briefing will be about 25 minutes. It'll be from myself and Jessie Carr from Minnesota Department of Health, but we'll go through the air quality index, a little bit about a reminder of what that is. A look back at the 2024 air quality season and some of the changes we're working on for the 2025 air quality season. And then finally, kind of an outlook for the remainder of the air quality season in 2025 and what we're expecting this summer into the fall. So this briefing corresponds with the Air Quality Awareness Week that EPA has put together. And so every day our social media will have different aspects of air quality, different facets of air quality impacts. So you can follow MPCA or PCA, AQI, or Minnesota Department of Health to get that information. And so that will be going all week. And this, corresponds with that week as well. So the air quality index, or AQI, is what my team forecasts, and there's different levels depending on the severity of the pollutants in the air, green, yellow, orange, all the way up to maroon. For an air quality alert, when the AQI goes to 101 or higher, that's when it becomes unhealthy for sensitive groups, and Dr. Carr will have some more information about who are those sensitive groups. But that's what prompts an air quality alert. And so the AQI can be for different ground level pollutants. So there's ground level ozone, fine particle pollution like wildfire smoke, and we're adding in coarse particle pollution this year as well. So a little bit about how we actually forecast air quality. So a lot of people wonder, well, how do you even go about forecasting the air quality index? And really it comes down to the meteorology of what's going on in the atmosphere and how it impacts atmospheric chemistry. And so the team is made up of meteorologists because that is really the biggest impact to air quality forecasting and air quality levels is meteorology. And so we take all the standard meteorological variables that other forecasters are looking at, and then we layer in atmospheric chemistry. We know that from our background as a regulatory agency. We have a pretty good pulse at what the kind of background air concentrations look like. And then we try to account for human behavior, or at least point people in the directions of how they can reduce their impact when there are bad air quality days. So, things like working from home, lowering your vehicle emissions by taking fewer trips, limiting prescribed burns on bad air quality days, things like that. And so all of these get layered together, and that's how we form the AQI, or air quality index forecast. So looking back in 2024, we had forecasted a slightly above average year, and it turned out to be a little bit above average, well above average in northwestern Minnesota, but overall about average across all of the state. So compared to 2023, which still remains the record, we had 14 events, which again would be considered unusual about 10 years ago, but when you factor in the entirety of the record now, it's about average. And so we had 8 alerts in 2024 that covered 14 total days. And again, most of those were covering northwestern Minnesota, and all of those alerts last year were caused by wildfire smoke, fine particle pollution. Those wildfires were mainly in Canada. We did not have any local fires that caused problems this past year. And we got fortunately, we frankly got fortunate that the weather patterns were more of a northerly complex of wind. And so that's why northwestern Minnesota was heavily impacted and North and South Dakota were impacted. Minnesota was barely just grazed, but there were a lot of fires and quite a bit of impact. This all underpins the fact that checking the air quality index, checking the air quality has really become a daily routine for many Minnesotans. We've gotten a lot more interest in people wondering about what the air quality will be, what their impacts will be, and that's why we're putting together this briefing to really reiterate, what people can do to protect themselves and what steps they can take when an air quality alert is issued. So again, I already kind of alluded to this, but the impact for air quality alerts in 2024 were very much in northwestern Minnesota. Again, all of these were for wildfire smoke events. We had 2 statewide events that happened with cold fronts that pulled smoke clear across Minnesota all the way down into southeastern Minnesota. But it really was the northern areas of the state, predominantly in August, July and August of 2024 that were impacted. We had several days that were red or unhealthy for everyone. Again, all wildfire smoke events, about average of what we've been seeing, but still impactful, especially for people in northern Minnesota. So with all that in mind, the forecast for 2024 was fairly on the dot. We forecasted 5 to 7 alerts, which is average. We ended up a little bit above that in northern Minnesota, but we ended up fairly close to that in the rest of the state. Our outlook last year was for 2 to 3 days of ozone. We ended up having a fairly wet period in June of 2024, and that cut down on the amount of ozone days. So we didn't hit that one quite right. But again, this is what happens when we look at seasonal outlooks. And so it really, with the or the ozone season rather, it's a very narrow window we're looking at in May and June. But wildfire season is predominantly July through August. So a little bit about the fires in 2024. These are satellite-derived hotspots from NASA. Each one of these spot areas or perimeters of fires. And so Minnesota was mainly impacted by fires that were in the Northwestern Territories, British Columbia, and Alberta. We had a secondary area later in the year in Saskatchewan in Western North Dakota. But again, the prevailing winds were predominantly from the north-northwest as opposed to the northwest in 2023. So while there was a lot of fire activity, it really was those weather patterns that kind of pulled the smoke more to the west. It nicked Minnesota, northwestern Minnesota. But again, areas to the west had more impact, and that was mainly because of the upper level winds. There's still a lot of fires, and again, we're still expecting an above average fire season in Canada. Not to the extreme of 2023, but the conditions up there are still fairly dry. So 2024, again, May and June were warm and wet. This really cut down on the opportunity for ozone, which needs, those warm, sunny days with low winds. The wildfires were very active. And in October 2024, we actually had our highest air quality day, which was from blowing dust. It reached the purple or very unhealthy conditions. And that day was prompted from a low pressure system that had 55-mile-an-hour winds that lofted dust from South Dakota and southwestern Minnesota. We did not have an air quality alert for that because we currently do not issue fine or coarse particle pollution PM10 alerts, and that will be changing in 2025. So next time we have an event like this with blowing dust, we will issue an air quality alert. It will be for coarse particle pollution, blowing dust. And those are predominantly driven by windstorms, and they happen about once every other year in Minnesota. This particular one blew dust all the way in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. It was a pretty widespread event. So wanted to take note of that. A lot of people had questions about what was going on. It was very dusty. It was 5-mile visibility at Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. So it's definitely enough that people noticed. So segue into the changes coming in 2025. Again, the big one is that we're adding in those PM10 or coarse particle pollution alerts. And PM10 are larger than those PM2.5 or fine particle pollution particles. They're larger, but they're still small enough that they can be inhaled and can cause issues with the respiratory and cardiovascular system, which Dr. Carr will talk about. Currently, starting as recently as 2024, MPCA did not issue alerts for PM10. It was usually kind of a very rare occurrence, but with our warmer winters and lack of snow cover, we've had bare ground, and these large storms can pick up dust and loft it basically anytime in the winter. And so the pollutant is PM10. The air quality index already has values built into it for PM10. So the colors won't change, nothing will change. The formulation is already there. We're just going to be adding that into our alert arsenal. Our MPCA web maps are already updated. So when we do have blowing dust days, the coarse particle pollution will show up on the map. And we will not be issuing daily forecasts for PM10. We'll just be doing alerts. And that is because our network is not very dense, especially in northern Minnesota. And frankly, we don't have a lot of bad PM10 days, but when they do happen, they tend to be pretty vivid and pretty, remarkable for people. And so we wanted to be able to give people a heads up to protect their health. And so an example of what this looks like over the different years, this is a blowing dust event time series. And so I really want to reiterate that these alerts will be for blowing dust that can be a hazard to health. They're not for visibility restrictions. The National Weather Service issues advisories and warnings based on visibility restrictions. So this will not be for that. This will purely be for health impacts. And the recurrence interval for these is about once every other year. So once every 2 years, we see an event like this in Minnesota. So we'll be adding in a lot of extra alerts. But again, when they happen, it tends to be enough dust in the air that people see it, they notice it, they contact us, they have questions. And so aligning with what the EPA has already given us in terms of guidance for issuing air quality alerts. So PM10, you might say, well, have you ever had blowing dust before? And the answer is no, not by not recently, but in the past several years, we've had more and more of these events that have been occurring. We had a close call just a couple weeks ago with a large storm that originated in Oklahoma and dragged dust all the way north. Seen here, the white shading in the satellite image is actually blowing dust. They typically occur in the fall, but in the past decade, with our warmer climate, we have had extended periods of time with no snowpack on the ground. Um, Therefore, when a storm comes in that would have been a blizzard because of with blowing snow, with the exposed ground, it can pick up dust and can loft it, and that's why they become more of an issue that we've been seeing and something that we wanted to address. And so, with this again exposed time period, they mainly occur in fall, but if we have exposed ground, they can happen anytime in the winter. Usually, once you have crops on the ground, that will kind of preclude the dust from being lofted. So it's really a winter and fall type of event. Along with that, we've changed a few things. We've added a Facebook page for MN AQI. And so our forecasts will be posted there daily. We'll also be able to have Facebook Live briefings for large air quality events, and that will give us kind of a new tool to interact with people and kind of get the word out. Again, Facebook Large will be for those larger events, usually for red or unhealthy for all events. We also have a new AQI hotline, 651-757-2766. That can be dialed from anywhere in the state. That will ring the forecaster on duty. And so if you have questions about air quality, you can reach out to us. We also maintain our X, or formerly Twitter account, but that will no longer be monitored. It'll just be an area where we'll post forecasts, and really pivoting towards Facebook where we can have more interactions with the Facebook Live briefings. So again, follow us at MNPCA on Facebook or MN_AQI on Twitter. So without further ado, the 2025 forecast for the season coming up this year. Well, first of all, we're still hanging on to some drought. We've had several active wet periods that have cut down a little bit on that, but much of Minnesota is still abnormally dry with a severe drought persisting across northern parts of the state. And that is likely to get worse over the next several weeks as we have kind of a prolonged dry and warm period. The Climate Prediction Center has above average temperatures forecasted for the next several months through August. And along with that, below average precipitation. And so those are kind of the recipes that together will favor the expansion of drought across the state. And along with that, will expand the wildfire threat. And of course, it's very hard this time of the year to forecast what will be going on in August, but the trends, long-term weather model trends and short-term climate model trends are that we will be developing more drought across the state, higher fire risk, and with that comes higher wildfire smoke risk. In addition to what's expected here in the United States, across southern Canada, the kind of similar types of situations expected. In May, we've had a very warm and dry start to the month that will likely continue for the next couple of weeks. And so the Forest Service is predicting a significant wildland fire prediction above normal in western Minnesota and Canada, across most of southern Canada, and above average risk for wildfires. Moving into June, you can see our risk here locally has kind of shrunk, but in Canada, it still hangs on. And since that has been the source region for the past couple of years of our smoke and our impacts, it's something we have a keen eye on. And that's why we are forecasting a slightly above average year. Again, moving into July, an expansion of those fire threat conditions in the western United States, which usually do not impact Minnesota. But the fires on the eastern side of the Rockies in Canada are the ones to watch out for. And again, it looks like an above average risk and a well above average risk going into August, again, because of the forecasted dry and warm period coming into the summer. So our forecast for 2025, a slightly above average ozone season with 4 to 7 ozone days expected. We've already started our ozone season. The earliest time we usually see ozone is May 2nd, and we almost exceeded on May 3rd this year. With the pattern we're in, I expect we're likely to have some ozone issues over the next several days. Currently no air quality alerts, but it's something we're paying very close attention to, and that's why we've upped our forecast really for May and the beginning part of June when we have a very high solar angle. The drought conditions across the state will again reinforce those kind of dry, sunny days. That's what we really need for the ozone development. Without that rain, it doesn't wash the ozone out, and the ozone formation and sunlight becomes more effective, becomes higher than it would if there was precipitation or clouds. So again, all of that working together to up our forecast. And the most likely areas to see ozone impacts are the Twin Cities suburbs, and areas around Rochester. Those are the areas that have the combination of most industry and the warmest temperatures. Our average is 2 to 4 days, so again, slightly above. For wildfire smoke, we are again going for a slightly above average wildfire season with 12 to 16 days expected. The local fire risk is elevated. Again, it's hard to forecast an individual fire event this far out, but the conditions will be there that, dry, warm conditions that would support the expansion of drought and the elevated fire risk. The drought will continue to stress vegetation across northern Minnesota and southern Canada. That's another key piece of looking for wildfire risk is the state of the fuels, and we are expecting that stressed vegetation will occur. And with the neutral El Nino pattern or El Nino Southern Oscillation or ENSO cycle, the upper level flow will be more variable. And so unlike last year where we had predominantly northerly winds, this year it looks like we're going to have more of a northwesterly component. And that again opens up the variability for having more wildfire smoke or fine particle pollution days. So this is similar to 2018 and 2024 seasons. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Jessie Carr, who will talk a little bit about the public health aspects of air quality pollution and how people can protect themselves and some of the takeaways that people should be learning when they are dealing with air quality. So Jessie, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks so much, Matt. Wonderful information and nice to look out at the season coming. So I'm going to talk briefly about some public health prevention and risk factors. I'm going to talk about some actions we can take to stay safe and healthy during these alerts, who might be some groups that are more sensitive to poor air quality during these alerts. And then I'm going to go over a new resource from MDH that's providing guidance for schools and childcare settings when we have these alerts. So first, what can we do to stay healthy during these alerts? They're becoming more frequent and we can't avoid them. But there is a lot that we can do to keep ourselves, our families, and our communities healthy during these events. The first thing is to stay informed. Matt had a great slide with all the ways that you can stay informed and get alerts through social media, through the Pollution Control Agency themselves, and other ways that we can make this checking for air quality alerts similar to how we check for the weather and part of our routine and keeping ourselves safe. When there is an alert, one thing we can do is limit our outdoor activities. Sometimes we must be outside, but especially during ozone alerts, we want to plan for morning activities where ozone levels are at their lowest, right? So as Matt said, that ozone really needs that combination of the sunlight and the hot days. And in the morning, the ozone hasn't had the chance yet to combine and form as strongly as it will in the later afternoon. So, and that specific guidance is in the alerts. Another great innovation of these alerts, having that health information specifically when there's an ozone alert, that'll be in there. But limiting your outdoor activities are really good choices that you can make. And if you must be outside, you can do so in ways that lower the intensity of your activities. You can take more frequent breaks and really pay attention to any symptoms in your body or breathing. This is for everyone. It's really important to remember that we are all, everyone is sensitive and can be affected by air pollution. Some people more than others, and I'll talk about that in 2 slides, but this really can affect us all. Folks that do not have asthma can still experience symptoms, shortness of breath, burning in your lungs related to these events, especially if we're doing higher intensity activities outside for longer times. I'm going to go ahead and post the MDH website in the chat that has some of this information and talk about some other things we can do to stay healthy. So one of the things, folks talk about just staying inside when there's an air alert. And if that is a choice for you, that can be a good choice, especially during those higher, those really unhealthy days during the red and purple days. And one thing you can do that I didn't know is that if you have an AC, either central air or a window unit, you can run that air unit on recirculate, and that filters the air. And so that's also true in your car. So if you don't even have to have the AC cooling, but if you're running it on the recirculate feature, then that really does work to filter out most of these particles in the air. When you don't have air conditioning and it's too hot to close your windows, A great option is to utilize public facilities with air conditioning and air filtration, like your libraries, community centers. And these are some, good things to have these in your mind for those days when we really are having a high in the red and the purple alerts where it's an unhealthy for everyone. Think about where you might go and like to spend time with your family and friends where you could have access to cleaner indoor air. When we are indoors, there are things that we can do that can prevent creating indoor air pollution, right? Air pollution can come from inside the home as well as outside. Some of the things indoors that you want to avoid during these events are smoking, burning candles or incense, frying foods, and vacuuming. Vacuuming can stir up some dust and particles in the process of sucking up the bigger stuff. And lastly, masking. We've all become more familiar with masking over the past few years with COVID. And so it's good to remember that air pollution functions a little differently. The kind of paper, comfort, or dust masks, they can block large particles like sawdust, but they really don't protect your lungs from the very small particles found in wildfire smoke, that PM 2.5 component that Matt talked about. So really having a well-fitting mask, an N95, or the KN95 is a second best option that is well-fitting around your face so that it's not allowing for the infiltration of those particles. And during an ozone alert, another specific thing for ozone, which is a gaseous pollutant, not a particle pollutant, masks are not recommended at all during ozone masks. They can actually kind of make that worse for the individual wearing them. So those are some things you can do to start. Everyone should start to build into our health routine to stay safe and healthy. And especially talking about folks who are more sensitive. And so you'll notice in the AQI guidance, there is that category in the orange of where it's unhealthy for sensitive groups. And so thinking about who are those groups and why might they be more sensitive. So people can be more sensitive to air pollution for two main reasons. One would be there's something different in how their bodies are functioning and taking in the air pollution, able to filter it and recover from that stress on the body. Or there are folks that, for a variety of reasons, may have higher exposures. They may be outside for longer, or they may be exposed to higher levels of pollutants. So in that first group of folks whose bodies function a little differently, we'll think about children, older adults, people with chronic respiratory or chronic cardiovascular conditions, and pregnant people. So for children in particular, the children's lungs are still developing. They tend to spend a lot more time outside and really engaging in more vigorous, hard play. And for those little bodies, that means that they're taking in more air per pound of body weight than adults are. And it can really impact those developing lungs. For older adults, they tend to have a higher rate of those pre-existing conditions, as well as a decline in the natural physiological defense systems that can help our body recover from that stress. So some of the chronic conditions that we really think about in relation to sensitivity to air pollution are lung diseases like asthma, COPD, emphysema, chronic bronchitis, and then heart diseases like coronary artery disease and other things related to hypertension. And then lastly, pregnant people that, again, their bodies are doing a lot of work, which makes it harder to get down and get back to those natural physiological response systems. They need a higher kind of oxygen in the blood. And that air pollution can affect the pregnant person's body as well as the developing fetus. And then in terms of other factors that can make folks more sensitive, people who work outdoors for longer durations, they tend to have higher intensity activities. And lower income households are also known to have higher reactivity because they may be less likely to have air conditioning, which has that protective ability to filter out some of the air particles, as well as they may be more likely to live near highways and pollution sources that can compound with those wildfire smoke events. So next, I want to talk about a new resource from MDH that we're really excited about. And I'm going to post another link in the chat so you all can see more about that. So this is as the frequency and intensity of these wildfire events has been increasing, we have been getting lots of requests, lots of calls, folks concerned about how to protect themselves, and particularly a lot of calls from staff in schools, childcare settings, coaches, and how can they, make the best decisions and know what to do to keep those kiddos and their staff safe. And so across MDH, we pulled multiple programs together, and then we wanted to develop supportive guidance that was aiming for clear and easy health protection steps that these staff could implement. We referred to other states that have similar guidance, as well as federal models around air pollution protection and physical activity intensity levels. So this Minnesota Outdoor Air Quality Guidance for schools and childcare centers, it provides recommendations for outdoor physical activity when that air quality starts to reach unhealthy levels. As I mentioned, children and people with asthma or other chronic conditions may be more impacted by air quality. So you can see that we've scaled here on the left, the air quality index on this against different kind of durations of activity outside that kids may be involved in, as well as some attention to those what the different types of sensitivity that kids might have. So, and this guidance is intended to support schools, childcare, PE classes, athletic practices, games, before and after school programming, camps, field trips, and other youth programming activities. So much of which is happening outside when we really want our kids to be outside, taking advantage of the resources that we have in Minnesota. So when air quality is unhealthy, as we talked about, moving activities indoors is one way to keep kids active and engaged. And what this guidance tries to do is it scales those physical activities against levels of intensity of the activities. So the activities are scaled to time outside and duration. So as an example, if you look in the column, it says 15 minutes to 1 hour. So a shorter, outdoor period, like a school recess, for example. The guidance would point to light intensity activities with breaks, as well as potentially an indoor option for more sensitive kids. Likewise, so for a longer duration example, like you see on the right column, for 4+ hours, like maybe an outdoor camp or something like that, they might take an additional suggestion to cancel or move inside those activities that would be moderate or heavy intensity during an orange alert. And likewise, you can see that the guidance changes by the alert and the time outside. And so on the website that I posted, that website also includes information on how to get those alerts, how to sign up and stay aware. It has information on what symptoms to look for, right? Because we're not all trained medical folks. And examples, it provides really great examples of activities for each of those activity levels, so that these staff who are making these decisions can have ready examples of, okay, what would be a lighter intensity activity? And so really supporting them to make the best decisions and make their decision-making more easy and clear during these alerts. The goal is for us all to stay active, be safe, and have fun. And I hope that's my wish for all of us for this coming summer and season, and with the support of pollution control and these great alerts, that can help us to do that together. So thank you so much for this time, and all of you in the media who are really supporting us to get these messages out to folks in ways that they can use and stay safe and have fun. So thank you again.